Hello everyone, welcome to my escape. If you're new here, my name's Katie, and on this channel, I just talk about books. Today's video is going to be a full in-depth recap of everything that happened in Empire of the Vampire by Jay Kristoff, because, if you didn't know, but I assume you do, today is in fact the release of the second book. If you don't have time to do a full reread of this guy, this video should have you covered. Please, 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 please note that this is a recap video. This is to help everybody remember what happened in the first book so they can go into the second book refreshed. If you have not read this book, sign off this video right now. Everything I say in this video will spoil this book, so if you haven't read it, last chance, get off the video now. I will do a spoiler-free review down the road, but for right now, this video is not for you. That's the first disclaimer. The second disclaimer is there are a lot of French names in here, and I'm not French, so I'm gonna do my best. If I butcher anything, I'm so sorry. Take it for what it is. I tried. With the disclaimers out of the way, leave a comment down below about how long you've been waiting for Empire of the Damned, the second book, because I know this one came out 3 years ago. I don't think I could have waited 3 years for the second one, but leave me a comment down below. How long have you been waiting to get into Empire of the Damned? Okay, so beginning, you have a very, very fundamentalist Christian world here. The history of it does kind of start with the religion, and essentially they have the infant redeemer who is crucified by the non-believers. An ambiguous time later, one conqueror conquers the 5 kingdoms and brings them together under the banner of the one faith, which is the religion in here, beginning the Empire of Eladane and the time known just as the Empire. So then the next important event that we need to know about happens in the time of the Empire 651, and that is Day's death. So this occurs when our main character is 8 years old, and Day's death is when the sun just kind of stops functioning. It's not giving off as much heat, it's not giving off as much light, and it's kind of the beginning of the end. So famine starts to occur because crops need the sun to grow, so crops are dying off, people are dying off, and it's giving the rise to the vampires because the sun's not there as a deterrent anymore or keeping their population in check. And again, like I said, Day's death does happen when our main character is 8, so that does bring us right into the story. But now moving into the Silver Saints. So the Silver Saints are known as the Silver Order of Saint-Michel. Saint-Michel is the area and the kind of like the headquarters of where their monastery is located. And the Silver Saints are all made up of pale bloods, which are half human, half vampire men, because only men can be pale bloods. And these men, they have the strength and some of the talents of their vampire fathers. They also have the cravings for blood. So it's a highly religious knight order, essentially, and they believe that they were born in sin, so they have to pay penance, and they pay penance by joining this knighthood and using their skills and their talents to hunt vampires and to protect the empire. So they are structured a lot like, you know, Christian priests. So at the top of the hierarchy you have the abbot, and then beneath him you have the friars, which are basically like the sworn-in brotherhood, and then under them you have the initiates, and they're the apprentices. Some really key facts of the Silver Saints. Most of their strength comes from their faith and from silver, because silver is deadly to vampires. As they go about their training and as they hit certain milestones in their training, they get inked in silver tattoos of angels or the Mother Maid or the infant redeemer, all of these religious effigies. They get them inked on their skin in silver, and then when they go out to fight, they take their shirts off. It's called fighting silver clad, and then basically they channel their faith through their bodies in the silver, and it projects basically harmful light at the vampires while they fight, giving them just kind of that extra edge. Basically, it's the equivalent of using religion as a form of armor while fighting. And something else you do hear a lot of is the 7-star, and all it is a star with 7 points that they have on their hand, and then when they hold their hand out, it again projects that light at the vampires. And as I said, they're a very, very, very religious order, so they do follow like the priesthood again, so no wives, no lovers, nothing like that. You're sworn to God. You go to mass every day, and you take Sanctus, which is their sacred sacrament. But really what it is what sustains them and sustains their vampire side of their ancestry. So Sanctus is something they smoke in a pipe, and it is a chemical compound with a bunch of other things, but the main ingredient is vampire blood. And this gives them the strength, and it feeds their cravings, and it allows them to not feed off of humans. However, it is highly, highly addictive, and the older you get, the less it numbs those cravings. So when the friars or the abbot get to an age where they can no longer contain those cravings, then they have a whole ritual to basically have others in the order kill them under the phrase, "It's better to die a man than live a monster." But the vampire blood, both through the Sanctus and also just in their blood naturally. It allows them to be stronger, it allows them to heal faster, it allows them to be severely wounded and wounded to the point where all humans would die, but they can recover from it. So there are a lot of pros, and it does make them the ideal fighters against a vampire legion. And then lastly, with the Silver Saints and Saint-Michel, I did just want to mention that there is a sisterhood that is at the same monastery, but obviously they're in the priory. So their structure, you have prioress at kind of top, she would be the equivalent of the abbot, and then you have the sisters, and then you have the novices at the bottom that are again training to be nuns. They, however, have no vampire blood in their system. They are full human. They just work along with the pale blood order. And again, this is heavily influenced by Christianity. So breaking down the religion in there, you have figures that are essentially the equivalent. So you have the infant redeemer, you have the mother maid, you have 7 martyrs, and you have angels that are known for different things. For example, our main character is Gabriel. He's named after the angel of fire. Probably will show you something down the road, but I'm not really here to tell you what's coming. If you have any theories, you can leave them down in the comments below. You do have those figures. You do have the wheel which pops up, which is essentially where they crucified the redeemer. But that's where we're at for the religion. So then moving into the breakdown of the vampires, there's 2 types. So you have the high bloods, which is what you think of when you think vampire, human-esque, fully formed, beautiful, ruthless, cruel, immortal, strong, all of those kind of things. And then on the other side, you have the wretched, which are mindless, half decomposed, just out for blood, will do whatever, but they don't actually know what they're doing and they have no strategy or structure to them. Now, the high bloods can control the wretched to a degree. However, it is completely random whether someone is going to turn at all, and if they do turn, if they're going to become a wretched or if they're going to become a high blood. So oftentimes vampires turn and wake up alone. So then focusing on the high bloods are the ones that are going to sire the Silver Saints, and they also sire other high bloods, of course. And the gifts are passed on from your sire. So there are 4 bloodlines ish, we'll get there. Basically, whoever created you, you'll have the same gifts of that bloodline. The first bloodline is Divok. They're known as the Untamed. Their signia is a bear and a broken shield, and their special power is that they're extremely, extremely strong, stronger than all other vampires. Said something like they could bring down a mountain with their fist. The second bloodline we have is Voss. They're known as the Iron Hearts. Their signia is a white raven, and their skin is extremely hard to penetrate even with silver and fire, so it makes them very difficult to kill. And they can also read minds. Number 3 is Chastin? Sorry, I don't know. But it's 2 black wolves with 2 red circles. They're known as the Shepherds. They can control and speak to animals, and the really, really old ones can even shift into cats and bats and into similar species. And lastly, we have Blood Elan, and their signia is roses intertwined with snakes on a heart-shaped shield. They're known as the Whispers, and they can control emotion. Now, we do know that there is a 5th bloodline, however, there's almost nothing known about it, except that our main character descends from them, and his special gifts are, if he gives somebody a vial of his blood, he'll be able to find them and track them, and also he's able to boil the blood in vampires if he's able to get his hands on them. So just like our main character, all of the other Silver Saints descend from some vampire, and their sire does matter as well, because it does tell them which gifts they're going to have. And the gifts of both vampires and pale bloods does depend also on the strength of the sire, so the older they are, the more power they'll give. There are constraints, however, on vampires, so they have to be invited in. They can't cross running water. The daytime does weaken them, even though the sun's not at full strength. If the sun were to be at full strength, then the sunlight would burn them. Holy light burns them, silver burns them and can kill them, fire can kill them. There's also something around religious effigies or symbols, again, that artwork that the Silver Saints have tattooed on their skin. It either weakens the vampires or makes it more difficult to approach. There's some sort of weakness there with the actual effigies themselves. Holy water or liquid of any kind, any liquid that's been blessed by a priest, also burns them, and they can't step on consecrated ground. So it is very much, again, rooted in that religion. So then just some vocabulary that we haven't covered yet. The blood hymn is the feeling of high or strength that the Silver Saints get after they've smoked the Sanctus. And a Sanctus, again, being the Holy Sacrament, the pipe full of blood that they smoke for strength. Silverclad is when they take off their shirts and they fight half naked, because it's that silver ink that offers them strength and a type of armor through their religious faith while fighting vampires. There are Inquisitors, which is a different religious sect, also following the Christian, but they're extremists and they kidnap and torture people to weed out the sinful but essentially they're just evil under the banner of religion. Cold blood is another name for vampire. Chevalier is something that they also call Gabriel, but what it is a sworn knight or sword of the empire. And then Ash Drinker is the name of the sword that Gabriel has later on in the book. It's the one that's half broken, a little bit crazy. And his sword when he was younger is Lion's Claw, so you'll hear him refer to those pretty casually. With all that out of the way, now we're gonna get into what actually happened, what occurred in these pages. So if you just wanted a reminder of the world and everything, that's covered. This is going to break down the plot and what happened in this book. So this book is set out in 3 timelines. Timeline 1 is from when our main character Gabriel is a child and him discovering who and what he is and being taken into the order. Timeline 2 is the Holy Grail arc and that there. And then timeline 3 is when he's telling the story. So to make it easier, the book does jump back and forth, but again, it's all spoilers here. So I'm gonna go chronologically based off of the book's timeline, not the book's layout. So our main character is Gabriel de Leon. They call him Chevalier, they call him Little Lion. He's got a lot of nicknames out there, but at the beginning, he's just Gabriel, he's just Little Lion. His mother was a noblewoman. She got pregnant without getting married. Her father cast her aside. So then Gabriel's father married her. They moved into this little village in the Nordlands, and basically he was raised as a peasant. He does have 2 younger sisters. His father is a drunk and also very abusive against him and only him. Then when he's 8 years old, Day's death hits. So again, the son stops offering any sort of life or support. And at 14, he meets his first vampire. It happens to be his sister, and he has to kill her, but he doesn't really understand what's happened or know what's gone on. All he knows is that he was going to die and then he didn't because somehow he killed his sister. And then at 14, 15-ish, he's dating a girl named Ilsa. They're fooling around and he bites her and he starts drinking her blood. She obviously screams and the townsfolk immediately turn on him and start attacking him. And he gets saved by the Silver Saints. So enter Greyhand, who will end up being his master, and Aaron DeCoste, who ends up being another apprentice with him. They roll in and they go, "You can't kill this guy. He's a pale blood. This is what he is. He's gonna come with us, he's gonna serve in the monastery, and he's gonna protect you from the vampires." This is where it's revealed to him his abusive father is not his real father. A lot of pieces click for him in that. So Gabriel leaves the village with the Silver Saints and he never sees his family again. And they go off and return to Saint Michon. At the monastery, he's tested for his bloodline to see what his powers are for and to start training. They test him in all 4 of the bloodlines. He doesn't pass any of them, so they deem him a frail blood, which means that the vampire that sired him was so young they hadn't exhibited their own skill or their own trait yet, so they didn't pass it down the line, and he's seen as less than or weaker because of this. But of course, that's not true. He's from a 5th bloodline, was thought to have died out, so they don't test for it anymore, and when some of the older people in the order find out he has these blood skills, some of them want to kill him, and Frere Greyhand is the one that steps up and says, "No, we're not going to do that, we're going to see how this goes," and kind of saves him. However, Gabriel overhears that. Nobody directly talks to him about this, and that's really a sticking point, is that he doesn't know who he is or who he's descended from. Moving throughout his time at the monastery, he's bullied because he's a peasant. He's also bullied because he's a frail blood, and overall he's just not having a great time, but he does really want to make a name for himself. It's important to him to find a place, and he really does attach to this idea that he can pay penance, he can redeem himself. He really does fall into the religion and the indoctrination quite quickly, and he works really hard to be the greatest swordsman, the greatest warrior, but he is focused highly on pride and acknowledgement. He goes on missions with Greyhand and DeCoste. DeCoste and him at the beginning really don't get along and actually hate each other, and as they go on these missions, while Aaron and Gabriel get closer, Greyhand and Gabriel do not, because Gabriel sucks at following directions. He kind of does whatever he feels is right, and he ends up costing Greyhand his eye and his arm in one of the battles because Gabriel didn't listen. On this one key mission, they pissed off a very, very powerful vampire of the bloodline Voss. They were not able to kill her, but they did intercept a message that showed the Forever King, which is the head of the Voss bloodline, how to invade an area and take over and conquer. Going back to Saint Michon, they relay this information to the Empire. The Empire sends legions of forces to the Silver Saints. The Silver Saints join them, and they go to confront the vampires. Gabriel gets left behind because, again, he doesn't follow directions, and this is his penalty. Also, DeCoste is left behind because they find out that he is gay and in a relationship with Baptiste, who is a blacksmith and very religious, bigoted order, so they're locked up. In this time, Gabriel finds out that it was a hidden message within it, and the vampires are actually attacking from an entirely different place, and if they can't stop them now, then they'll lose this entire section of land. Gabriel takes a bunch of the sisterhood, Aaron and Baptiste from the cellars, a lot of the blacksmiths, anyone they can find, and they go as like a ragtag group to confront this legion of vampires in the mountains. They do confront them, they do win. This is when Gabriel really makes the first name for himself, and also when he really starts to use his gifts consciously. And he kills that boss vampire they were hunting before, and that makes him a prime enemy of the Forever King because that was one of his children. Coming off of this save, again, he is really rewarded and praised. The Empress herself anoints him Sword of the Realm. However, this battle cost Gabriel a lot, not only the people that died that he had brought with him, but also while this was happening, that original vampire went and slaughtered his entire village before joining the battle. So he returns to his village, mother, sister, father, all dead. And then his mom is never able to tell him who his father is or what his lineage is. All that we do know is that the mom did have feelings for the vampire and knew what he was. And then over his time at Saint-Michel, whenever he's between missions and actually at the monastery itself, he spends a lot of time sneaking into the forbidden section of the library because he wants to find more out about his bloodline that nobody will talk about. On his trip into the forbidden section, he runs into novice Astrid, who's part of the sisterhood. She's also not allowed in the forbidden section of the library, so they agreed to keep each other's secrets and to help each other research because she is really looking into Day's death and why it began. And then soon they're joined by a second novice named Chloe, and it's really the three of them. Every night they're in the library, they research the origins of Day's death, how to end it, and then also looking for his bloodline. And then over time, Astrid and Gabriel fall into a forbidden relationship and they just can't stay away from each other. So they keep that secret and hidden, and this progresses for 5 years up until Gabriel's 21. Astrid does get pregnant. They have to tell the Order what's been going on, and the Order excommunicates them and says, get out. So then they leave and they find Aaron and Baptiste somewhere else in the kingdom where those two have settled because they were also excommunicated, but because they were gay. Here at Aaron and Baptiste's is where Astrid and Gabriel, they get married and they have their daughter, and they name her Patience. They go and find like a little homestead, and they seem to have a very peaceful life for about 11 years before the Forever King comes to get his revenge and shows up and slaughters Patience, the daughter, and Astrid, the wife, and leaves Gabriel because the Forever King wants a good enemy. In this battle, Gabriel also breaks Ashdrinker his sword. His sword has magical abilities where the sword can speak to the wielder, and once she's broken, she kind of goes a bit loopy and a bit crazy. So you'll hear her speaking throughout the book as well. And then, of course, Gabriel wakes up. His wife had turned into a vampire, so he killed her. His daughter was dead, and he vowed to kill the Forever King, so he sets off into the Forever King's territory. That's kind of the end of timeline 1. Moving into the second timeline and really more into the Holy Grail. He's about 32, he gets ambushed in the woods, he ends up having to kill the horse that has been with him since he was 15. He ends up in a tavern, quite drunk, and he comes across Chloe, who he hasn't seen since he left the Order. Chloe thinks it's a sign from God. She's traveling with a ragtag group, so she has a priest named Rafa. She's traveling with a young boy who's like 14 named Dior. We find out later that that's actually a 16-year-old girl, but at the time it was about a 14-year-old boy. They're traveling with a bard, essentially, named Bellamy. A witchy-ish hunter. We're not really sure. She's definitely a warrior, but she can also talk to an animal, so there's some weird vibes there. Seisha, I think? Something like that? I'm not really sure. I'll put it on the screen. That one really threw me for a loop. And the animal that she can seem to talk to and really fight with is a puma, panther, cat family of some kind, and it goes by Phoebe. So it's a very weird group, and Chloe says, this is ordained from God that we run into you. We need you to help us get to this area. Like, can you help escort us? Because he's this great swordsman and this really well-known silver saint. Initially, he's like, absolutely not. I don't care. I've lost all my faith. Like, all I care about is my revenge. But then he finds out that the sons of the Forever King, one of the very powerful vampires, is also hunting this party. So Gabriel decides that he's going to use this party, and specifically this boy Dior, as bait to bring the Forever King to him so he can get his revenge. So he does end up joining the group. So then they go on this journey to find the Holy Grail. As they go about this, Gabriel learns that Dior herself is the Holy Grail, and that just means that she is a descendant of the Redeemer. So she has like the blood of the Redeemer in her veins, and her blood is able to do things. Her blood is able to kill vampires, but it's also able to save humans on the brink of death. And they're making their way as a group back to Saint-Michel because that's where the prophecy says that the Holy Grail should be able to end Day's death. So while they're on this journey, they're being chased by the Inquisitors, both because Gabriel pissed them off and also because they're after Dior. They're being chased by the Beast of Valin, who is the son of the Forever King, also known as Danton Voss, and they are being followed, stalked by this one vampire woman who wears this like weird white mask and her face beneath it is shredded, but she's also a blood witch and she wields a sword made of her own blood, and she like can disappear into like a swarm of moths. No one in the group really knows where she falls into it, but she pops up every now and again, and she is also after Dior, but at the same time she's killing the other vampires that are hunting them. And Gabriel is also seeing Astrid in vampire form, who's like stalking him or haunting him. It does turn out to be a projection of his guilt and his grief over losing his wife and his daughter, and knowing again that Astrid was a vampire at the end. So while they're on this journey, they have to make some stops along the way, and at one point everyone in the group dies except Dior and Gabe. And Gabe makes the decision that he can't leave this girl, he can't leave the Holy Grail, she's too important, both because of she's the Holy Grail, but also just because he develops an attachment to her. And then I do want to make like a smaller note. This isn't a major thing, but I think it's going to become a major thing. So as this is a recap, I wanted to throw it in there. While they're on this journey together, Gabriel loses his Sanctus and he's highly, highly addicted to it. So he's basically curled up in this ball and he can't move. He's not really of any use. And Dior goes and steals him Sanctus from this very sketchy witch-like person and her skeleton business partner, and I think that's gonna have some terrible consequences down the line, so just throwing that in there. Dior did steal a bunch of Sanctus for Gabriel from this witchy person. While trying to get away from everyone chasing them, Gabriel brings Dior to fort that Baptiste and Aaron had established, where Gabriel and Astrid had gotten married and had their daughter. It brings up all of the grief of what Gabriel has gone through, and that's really when we got his story of what happened to his family and when Dior found out as well. The vampires do come to the fort. Dior is sick of people dying for her, and she's already had so many people die for her that she ends up running. Gabriel is forced to chase her. A big battle ensues. They end up together killing Danton. Weird vampire blood witch ends up killing a lot of the vampires as well, all until a group of Silver Saints find them. In tow with them is Chloe, because she wasn't actually dead, and they have come to help out. So now that they're reunited, they all go to take Dior back to Saint Michon. Greyhand is now the head of the order after all this time has passed, and a lot of the other frères are people that Gabriel had fought with and been in wars with previously. Some of them were really excited to see him, also because he was so famous and so good at being a Silver Saint, also because they were friends. However, some were not excited to see him because they remembered the sin of why he left. Gabriel finds out while he's there that the intention is to kill Dior and drain her completely dry of all her blood in order to make this prophecy happen. He says, absolutely not, this is wrong, like we can't do this. And the Silver Saints, his old brotherhood, end up saying, no, you actually can't stop us, this is what we have to do. So they end up taking him to Heaven's Bridge and killing him, throwing him off the side of the cliff. Gabriel definitely should have died, but wakes up, finds the vampire blood witch, giving him her blood, saving his life, giving him extra strength. He's very, very mad because he had sworn to his wife that after she passed, he would no longer take any blood because he had been feeding off her for years instead of doing the Sanctus. So he's really upset, and then it's revealed that this blood witch is his sister, who didn't actually die when the village was slaughtered. She rose as a high blood, but because of her injuries from the vampire that had come to get revenge, she'd lost her face, and she held Gabe responsible for everything that occurred. So she hates him. She's got crazy power. She said she needs him alive because she needs him to go onto the consecrated ground and go and save Dior, because she can't, because vampire, consecrated ground, all of that. He scales the cliff, goes back into the monastery. I don't know if he kills everyone, but he definitely kills the key people, brothers he'd went to war with before, Greyhand, who was like a father figure to him, and then also Chloe, who's one of his best friends. He kills both of them. He burns the book that had the prophecy and the ritual that they were using, burns it so that nobody can use it to attack Dior again, and he takes Dior away. And that's where that story kind of ends for now. And then the third timeline is current day. So Gabriel's 35, it's 3 years after everything has happened. He has been imprisoned by vampires in this cell tower type thing, and he's locked into this very barren room with one vampire who goes by Jean-Francois, and he is of the house that I can't pronounce, Chastin? because we know that the Forever King is dead. So sometime in there, we know the Forever King died, and the new leader is the Empress of Wolves and Men. So she is a leader of the House Chastin who can control animals. So Gabe, locked in the room with Jean-Francois, and Jean-Francois is chronicling his whole life. So he's getting Gabriel to tell him the life of his story, which is where we get our two timelines, kind of. Gabe flips back and forth between them. We can see how faithless Gabe is and how pessimistic he is. He's also highly, highly addicted to the Sanctus, and he can't really go without it whatsoever, and he's fully motivated by that. But we also know that he's the last Silver Saint, and he doesn't really believe in anything anymore. So at the end of the book, Gabe ends up attacking Jean-Francois and trying to boil his blood. He fails, and Jean-Francois is very mad, but he says we will pick up the story again tomorrow, because this entire book was a story told in one night by Gabe, apparently, and chronicled. But that is where we leave off for book 2. So then, moving forward into key characters and names you should remember, obviously Gabriel de Leon, they call him Gabe, they call him Little Lion, they call him Chevalier. He's our main character. Definitely know that one. You have Jean-Francois, which is the vampire that's chronicling everything that's going on. You have Céline, which is his little sister. He also calls her Little Hellion, and she ends up being the vampire blood witch. I expect we'll hear about Greyhand and Chloe. Greyhand, again, because there's a 5-year gap that we don't really know what happened. We just know that there were a lot of battles when Gabriel stayed at Saint-Michon. So Greyhand would have been there for all of that, even though he is dead now. And then also Chloe, because Chloe, Astrid, and Gabriel all did the research together on the bloodlines and Day's death. So again, in that 5-year span, I expect a lot more information will be given to us about what they kind of uncovered as we progress. So those are 2 names you should keep in mind, even though they are dead, or as far as we know they're dead. And then, because it's so traumatic to him, Astrid was his wife who was murdered. Patience was his daughter who was also murdered. In terms of enemies, the Forever King would be the main one I would keep in mind. He's also known as Fabien Vos. I also wouldn't be shocked if we saw Aaron DeCoste again or Baptiste, because they're still alive and on Gabriel's side as far as we know. And yeah, there's not many people like that. And then of course Dior, the Holy Grail. We're gonna have to know what happens there. So I would say those are the main characters you should kind of keep in your mind. And that is everything I think you need to know in Empire of the Vampire. So I hope you feel prepped. I hope this really got your mind spinning about everything that happened in this book so you can be ready to go into Empire of the Damned. I do want to know, if you haven't picked it up already, do you have any theories about what's going to happen or what's going to be revealed? And if you do, leave them down in the comments below. I would love to hear your ideas of where the stories are going. Aside from that, don't forget to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. I post videos every Saturdays and shorts throughout the week, so ring that bell for notifications and you won't miss anything. And I hope to catch you guys in the next one. Bye!